Hello and welcome to Lessons in Leadership. Bill Storm here with you. And this week we're moving on to chapter 12 of our study series of John Maxwell's book, Leadership Gold. Now, the title of this chapter is Your Biggest Mistake is Not Asking What Mistake You're Making. When I read the title of the chapter, I stopped and it gave me pause and I thought to myself, I wonder what the biggest mistakes are that I'm making in my own business. So this one is especially I'm excited to share this with you, and I hope it'll give you pause also to stop and say, I wonder what the biggest mistakes I'm making in my own career or in my own business. So let's dig into it. And again, remember there's 26 lessons in this series. So you're going to want to be sure to like and subscribe to the channel right now so that you're notified when the next lesson does become available. And of course, if you missed one of the first 11, you can go back and review them at your convenience. Also, if you'd like the show notes and worksheets for today's lesson, please just shoot me a quick email at billstorm@billstorm.com, and I'm happy to send them your way. Okay, without further ado, let's dig in. Your biggest mistake is not asking what mistake you're making. Now, remember, this is a study series, so I'm going to share with you what John has to say about this, and then we can discern whether or not we agree or disagree and what we want to add to our leadership toolbox. So we don't like to talk about mistakes. In fact, many of us spend our careers trying to avoid them, we try to hide them, or we try to explain them away. But what John does here is he flips the script and he says that our biggest mistake isn't making a mistake, it's failing to ask what mistakes we're actually making. Now that's a small shift, but it changes everything. So mistakes aren't the enemy, they're a mirror. They show us what to improve, where to grow, and how to lead more effectively. But if we never stop to ask the question, we miss the lesson. Now, if you're a mid-career professional and you feel like you're stuck in your corporate life, or maybe you're a business owner and you're feeling kind of stuck, you're kind of stuck in neutral, you're not going forward, you're not going backwards, this principle is really, really powerful. Burnout often comes not from one catastrophic decision, but from years of smaller, unexamined mistakes, like ignoring your health, silencing your creativity, or staying in a role that is just draining you. So by asking hard questions now, you can change direction before those costs pile up. Now, why do some leaders struggle with mistakes? Well, John reminds us that leaders often resist confronting mistakes because of pride, because of fear, or image management, right? We don't want to look bad in front of other people. So the higher you climb, the harder it feels to admit that you're wrong. But here's the paradox. Leaders who earn the most trust are the ones who are willing to own their failures. They're willing to own their mistakes. So the same is true of professionals in transition. When you admit that corporate life is no longer for you, it may feel like a failure, but in reality, it's the first courageous step towards freedom. Okay. Denial only keeps you stuck. In fact, I remember working with one particular client and she said to me, I've spent my whole life in this field. I spent all this money on education and I feel like it's a waste, like throwing it away. But the thing is, it was a mistake because it wasn't the true path that she really wanted to be in. So asking what mistakes am I making is humbling, but it's also liberating, and it reframes mistakes from threats and it turns them into teachers. So let's talk about corporate burnout to entrepreneurial courage. Now, again, I've had countless conversations with professionals who tell me things like, I climbed the ladder. Is this all there is? Or I thought this job would give me security, but I feel trapped in it. Or I wanted more fulfillment, but I ended up just being exhausted. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I dreamed of, right? So the mistake wasn't in working hard. The mistake was never stopping to ask, am I on the right path for me, right? Not for somebody else, but for me. So when I left sorry, I'm feeling a little under the weather here. That doesn't stop me, of course, right? So when I left the safety of corporate structure, the security of corporate structure to build my own coaching business, it wasn't because I had all the answers. Matter of fact, that was far from it, right? It was because I finally dared to ask myself better questions. Where am I making mistakes and how I use my gifts, right? I was given a certain measure of gifts and talent, God-given gifts and talent. Am I using them the right way? What roles or environments are keeping me from thriving, from being a good steward of those gifts and talents? And then what would happen if I stopped ignoring the signs and started trusting my calling? Holy smokes, look at that. What would happen if I stopped being so fearful and I started trusting what I was being compelled to do or what I felt I was being called to do? That's a messy process. That's a scary process. And I made plenty of mistakes along the way. Any of you who have known me for a long time can probably see the difference between me now versus me 20 years ago. But that's how we learn. Each one of those lessons that helped me to grow stronger and more capable of, get this, guiding others through the same transition, right? I can't help somebody get somewhere if I haven't been through it myself. We call that walking your talk. You have to have walked the path in order to be able to help somebody else do that thing. So here's a few lessons from John, few takeaways, if you will. Number one, make your mistakes your feedback system. Okay, so you welcome them. This is your feedback system. Instead of avoiding mistakes, embrace them as signals or signs and ask regularly, what can this teach me? I made this mistake. What can I learn from this? Number two, invite others to point out your blind spots. Oh boy, you got to have thick skin for this. John emphasizes that self-awareness not only comes from self-reflection, but also from honest feedback from other people. Find a mentor, find peers, or find coaches who will tell you the truth, not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Number three, redefine success as growth, not perfection. When you're stepping out of any comfortable environment and into the unknown, you're going to stumble, I promise you. So what matters is not flawless execution, but consistent growth. Here's a few action steps that you can take. If you're just burned out, and maybe you're just burned out of what you're currently doing, whether you're in corporate or whether you have your own business, and maybe you're thinking about starting something new. Here's how to apply what John teaches. Step one, conduct a mistake audit. Conduct a mistake audit. Grab a notebook and ask, what mistakes am I making right now in my career? What mistakes am I making in my relationship? What mistakes am I making in my habits? What mistakes am I making in my business? Don't judge them, just list them out. Awareness is the first win. Step number two, seek out perspective. Ask a trusted friend, mentor, or coach, what mistakes do you see me making? This is where King Solomon says, seek wise counsel. This takes courage, but provides insight that you're just not going to be able to get on your own. Number three, reframe failure. Write down a past failure that actually taught you something valuable. Think about it. What are some things where you fell on your face, but you learned something from it? Remind yourself that mistakes are the raw material of growth. That's how you learn, by mistakes. And then number four, apply one change. So pick one mistake you've identified and take a concrete step to correct it. Momentum builds when you turn insight into action. Okay. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I stopped doing, which I was surprised myself actually, is I stopped keeping stats. I stopped keeping track of my numbers. And that was something that I was conditioned. I was taught to do that very early on from my teenage years all along. And I did it and I did it and I did it. And as years went by, I had just got comfortable being comfortable. And I just really stopped tracking my numbers as well as I should have. Why is this important? Well, for me, if you're not, my belief is that if you're not growing, you're dying. Well, how are you going to know if you're growing unless you measure it, right? Because what gets measured gets done. And I just stopped doing it to the extent that I needed it to do. So that was one change that I made. I went back to the basics. I went back to the fundamentals. And I said, you know what? I need to start tracking things more closely to see how I'm doing here. So the question is what are you going to do? What's the one thing that you're going to apply? What's the one thing you're going to change? So John's lesson here is simple, but it's actually pretty profound, right? Your biggest mistake is not asking what mistake you're making. So whether you're leading a team or you're running a business or simply navigating your own career, the question keeps you humble. It keeps you teachable and focused on growth. Now, if you're a mid-career professional and you're feeling stuck, that may be one of the most important questions that you can ask yourself today. And maybe the mistake isn't that you're tired or maybe that you're unmotivated. Maybe the mistake is you're staying in a role that no longer aligns with your gifts, right? Everything has a reason and a season. Maybe it's time for you to grow up. And remember, leadership begins with self-leadership. The courage to face your mistakes may be the very thing that opens the door to your next chapter. A business that energizes you, fills you, and allows you to lead others by example. So gang, a lot of people that I work with, right? Many professionals I speak with, they feel very uncertain right now, especially with AI reshaping industries at lightning speed. I mean, changing the world at lightning speed. So this is why I created a workbook. It's called Finding Your True Gift, and that was inspired by my work with Tony Robbins. And inside, one of the exercises you're going to find helps to identify which of the three types you are, whether you're an artist, a leader, or an entrepreneur. And I think it may surprise you. But once you know this, you can finally see why some things drain you and other things energize you. And if you'd like a copy of it, just send me a DM or an email, connect with me in any way, and I'm happy to send it your way. Now, one quick little bonus item before we close here today. This is a biblical alignment check. Again, I like to take anything that we learn, and we don't want to take what somebody writes in a book as gospel. We want to take gospel as gospel. So we check something new with something old that is proven, right? So John reminds us that leaders have to be willing to confront their mistakes and learn from them. And this principle really aligns strongly with scripture, which teaches humility, self-examination, and correction. I'm just going to give you one example. If you want to take a deeper dive into this, you can download the worksheet that I have with a complete biblical alignment check for this chapter. But Proverbs 12:1 says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. Okay, that's pretty straight to the point. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. So the Bible here affirms that wisdom comes from accepting correction, not avoiding it. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this lesson for today. As always, I'd love to be able to share these things with you. We're all stronger, we're all smarter together. We'll see you next week. And if you'd like any of the handouts, please feel free to reach out.